Aisling Franciosi. So just a little secret, like we didn't really, we didn't really want to bring her out beforehand because we didn't want you to know what she really looked like. And we wanted to show you what a complete transformation this movie really is. Let's just start at the beginning. How did this land? Like, how did you first come into contact with this material? What was your initial response? Just tell us a little bit about your introduction to it.
First of all, thank you for sticking around and for watching the film.
Thank you.
For me, it kind of happened like any other project, honestly. Initially, I got sent a script and they said, do you want to go on tape for this? And I started reading it, and honestly, within 15 pages, I thought, wow, there's something really special going on here, and I want it. And I actually, I had so much to do that day that I read enough of the script to give me context for the scenes I had to send. And I noticed that the character sang, so I thought, I'll add a song, because if it goes well at some point, they'll ask me, can I sing? And I just chose a favorite Irish ballad of mine, and I sang it in Irish, and I sent off the tape. And they said, Jen responded really well, she wants to Skype with you this Saturday. And when I finished reading the script, in order to chat to her properly about it, the scene where I'm confronting Hawkins in the bar, that was the song that I chose to send without knowing that it was in the movie, which went down really well with Jen. And then I had to wait, I had to fly myself out to LA. I did a 2.5-hour callback. I wrote to Jen, begging her to give me the role and telling her I'd give her everything. And then I got cast, and we had to wait a while. I mean, it's been 3.5 years now since I first auditioned, so yeah.
I think I read somewhere, or you heard you in an interview where you said you didn't realize it was the same director who had done the Babadook when you first
Yeah, not
read
initially. Honestly, I just got the script and I went straight to reading it. And then I was like, whoa, who wrote this? And I realized it was Jennifer, and I thought, oh wow, this is, yeah. I mean, on top of wanting to just play Claire and be part of this project, I thought getting to work with Jennifer would be a privilege.
And the singing part you mentioned, I mean, it's sort of been maybe not completely accurately reported about your history in the world and your education in singing, but can you sort of explain exactly, because you were trained as a singer to a certain degree. Can you explain exactly?
It somehow got out there that I'm an opera singer, which I am not. I trained classically, yeah, when I was in school and stuff. I trained my voice, and I actually did audition to go to train to be an opera singer, and I got in, and then I thought, I do not want to be an opera singer. I mean, they're amazing, but it's just not for me. Yeah, it's interesting with the singing, actually. I mean, firstly, I'm really proud to be putting some Irish songs on the screen, and the Gaelic scenes as well. Yay! But, I would never crack out one of these tunes at a party or something, so it was an added layer for me to kind of get to, it's another element of the character, and I sang, and Jen was like, no. She's like, I mean, this is way too pretty. You need to make her sound real, and she's a poor working class, even poorer than that, from the west coast of Ireland, So finding her sound was really interesting, and I have to say, there are some amazing shan-nose singers in Ireland, but we were kind of going for that sound. I'm not a shan-nose singer, but we were going for that sound.
Talk about, because this is a period film, and it's a period of history and in a place that we know not a lot about outside of Australia, and I'm not even sure in Australia how much they talk about this part of their history, but tell me about the research. Tell me, what did you do on your own? What did Jennifer give you? Talk about that part of just learning about the period.
Thankfully, Jennifer and I struck up a really close relationship pretty much straight away. We were very much on the same page about how we wanted to approach things. She, obviously, having written the script, had done tons of research herself. She's meticulous and completely committed to authenticity and truth and everything. So, I mean, by the time, from when I had first auditioned to when we started filming, a year had passed, and I did all sorts of research. I mean, obviously, historical context. I did want to learn about the Aboriginal history too, but for me, the focus just for Claire was particularly on, PTSD, violence against women, sexual violence, I worked with a clinical psychologist who was attached to the project called Dr. Lane Barr. She's unbelievable. And she came with me and we went to Centers for Domestic Abuse, and I chatted with the social workers there, and I met with real life victims, rape victims. So there was a lot of, you know, apart from the historical context, to add to that, you know, these are things that these people at that time were, it was a brutal, brutal time in history. And you're right about the Australians even not necessarily knowing the extent of it, because in Tasmania in particular, in Australia they're told that it was a total genocide, but it wasn't. You know, there are no full-blooded Aboriginals in Tasmania, and that's why we had to get Bakeley from Darwin. But you can, you know, for them this is it's honestly one of the most incredible things about this is that it meant so much to the Aboriginal community in Tasmania, because they said, you know, like, we're still here, we don't look the way that you think that we should, but you can't deny us our heritage and our history just because we don't look the way that you think that we should. So it was important for us to tell, you know, it was a brutal history, but we needed to tell it right. So.
Was it because, I think someone said earlier that the film got some funding from the Australian government, but in order to get that, they had to have a professional historian on set too, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
They have to, like, authenticate it. And also we had Jim Everett, who is an Aboriginal elder, on set with us every single day. And it was amazing because obviously they've lost a lot of their language. So they have Tasmanian Aboriginals have started piecing together bits of what they can find from languages, and they've got this new language called Palawakani, which is why it's so powerful to have it on screen for them, because they're like, we're now putting our songs and our language and like stamping this our presence in the world in this film. So we had Jim as well as the Aboriginal advisor, and Jen, before even filming, you know, got permission from him and like the blessing of other Aboriginal elders as well. So Jen is, like, she's a powerhouse and completely meticulous, so there was no way she wasn't going to make sure everything was authentic.
I think I read an interview with Jennifer about, especially in Australia at the time, that the male prisoners that are sent there were the worst of the worst, but a lot of the female prisoners were there just for minor infractions, and they were outnumbered by some ridiculous 8-to-1 or something like that. The women didn't stand a chance to a certain degree under those circumstances with those, the Englishmen at least, that were there. Was there ever any hesitation on your part once you really started digging into the things that you researched about doing this part? What was, you know?
No, it actually just made me angrier and angrier the more research I did, and more willing to do it. I was aware of some of the history, you know, of criminals having been sent over to Australia, but the more research I did, I just didn't realize how systematic it was. And as you say, at one point I think the ratio was crazy, something like 9-to-1 in Tasmania, and Tasmania was where they sent the absolute worst criminals and where they sent the women, because the ratio was 9-to-1. So you can imagine what happened when you as a woman arrived there. But on your point about the convicts, I mean, being a convict, you were dirt. Being Irish was worse again, and being a woman in Irish was like the worst of the worst.
I want to just, like, about shooting some of this. I mean, Sam Claflin has never played a part like this that I've ever seen, and he's just, there's nothing redeeming. There's no attempt in any way, there shouldn't be, to make him sympathetic or to figure out that, I mean, we were made aware that he's damaged to a certain degree, but there's not really a redemption in line for him. But what was your relationship like with him throughout the course of filming? I know you're not in a lot of scenes with him, there's sort of separate storylines, but at the same time, you obviously have very key moments together. I'm just wondering, like, how did you interact?
Initially, Jen and I had this idea that maybe it would be interesting if Sam and I didn't hang out very much in our prep period, so that we couldn't form a close relationship, to kind of give it this kind of distant feel on screen. But the more we started workshopping things, we realized like you cannot film scenes like that without having trust there and being comfortable with that person and being completely vulnerable with them. And also for Sam, like, not just for me, for what Sam has to do too, you know, it's a terrible position to be in. So I mean, as a cast, we became very, very close. I was down there for 6 months. The shoot was only 54 days, well, only, but I was down there for 6 months. So yeah, we did a lot of workshopping. We never rehearsed the scenes, actually, unless it was a practical rehearsal so that no one would get hurt, but a lot of workshopping. And we just did a lot of social things together, particularly, I mean, I clicked with, they're all wonderful cast. And Sam, I have to say, is unbelievably generous as an actor. When it's not on him, he's still giving more than 100%. He's helping people physically, whatever they need to get to where they need to go for their performance. But I also had a lot of time hanging out with Bakeley because he had never acted before this film, ever. He's amazing. It was his first time in front of a camera. But again, I mean, apart from the fact that it was important that he feel comfortable in front of a camera, it was important that, you know, I say some pretty terrible things to him, and it's important that we knew that we were friends, like off set.
Yeah, I was gonna say there are certain things that happen between the two of you that do make your character seem like, oh well, I mean, you have to remind yourself about the time period, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, there is certain unlikability to the way that
I love
she
that.
behaves. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
I mean, I don't love what she says.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that she's, you know, flawed and human.
I read a quote from Jennifer that she said that what she wanted to do with this film was sort of shine a light in the darkness, I think is how she put it. How do you think she went about doing that? How did the two of you work together to make that happen?
Well, the darkness part is easy.
Yeah.
But I think truly it's the relationship between Claire and Billy. You know, I think a lot of the focus in this film, because it is confronting, obviously, is the violence and the brutality of the period, but really, you know, Claire, we see her, she tries to go for an eye, and it almost destroys her. You know, she tries to commit suicide afterwards, and it's really only through her relationship with Billy, which, you know, is fraught at the beginning, and they essentially get to a part of just respect, you know, basic human respect, and more than that, care by the end, I think. But, you know, ultimately, he shows her humanity, and she chooses that, and that's what saves her at the end. And I think that is really the light of this film. It's like, you know, we can't continue this cycle of perpetual violence in retaliation to violence. So I think that's what we're trying to say. I mean, it sounds so corny because I think that the word is bandied around so much that it has lost some of its power. But, you know, love, or if you just want to say respect, like it's empathy, all these things that are harder and harder to find in dark times, and how like literally that's the only thing that will save us.
You said most of that 50-some days that you said you were shooting was done in the actual wilderness. Like, you were out there, it looks treacherous, it looks dangerous. What was the toughest part about just being and doing almost all of your shooting outdoors and in that environment?
There were a lot of complications. I mean, there were the logistical things. There's no film industry down in Tasmania, so we had to bring like a whole crew and all the equipment and the horses and everything down there. And like, you know, the crew were amazing. I love them so much. And they had to like drag their equipment, honestly, like up mountains. I'm not exaggerating. For me personally, the day in the river, thankfully, it was our last day of principal photography, and it was so cold. Tasmania is quite far south. And I actually got hypothermia and fainted. And my main panic, I was like, did we get the shot? It's the last day of shooting. So that was a tough day. Yeah, there were a few. I mean, it was fine. Thankfully, Tasmania does not have that many dangerous creatures. There are a lot of leeches and stuff like that. But I remember when I was reading the script before knowing how not as dangerous Tasmania was, there's like a scene where it says, she crawls into the hollow of a tree to sleep for the night. And I was like, God, like, I'm gonna get bitten by some spider and die. But that didn't happen.
I'm gonna ask one more question. We're gonna have a microphone right here at the end of this aisle. If anyone wants to come up and
Because that's not intimidating.
ask a question. They're pretty good so far. They're all right. But yeah, please come up. There's a lot of here. I'm sure some of you have things to say. I'm actually just genuinely curious because I don't know how you leave everything on that screen. Like, it's just like, it just seemed like physically, emotionally exhausting. How did being a part of this story change you?
Well, I'm glad you guys are meeting me now and not on the last day of shoot. Honestly, I found it incredibly cathartic. Well, I thought it would be incredibly cathartic playing this role. I'm someone who generally has struggled kind of in expressing like negative, or what I perceive to be negative emotions in everyday life. So I was like, woohoo, I can like be furious and like all these things without, you know, having it to be me, so to speak. But I actually found it way harder than I expected, that when you go to those places to turn on those taps, it was really hard to come out of. Yeah, when you're in that very negative and emotionally draining headspace all the time, I was in I think I had one day where I wasn't on set, and you're there for 14 hours or 16 hours sometimes, and you know, it's not happy-go-lucky material. Yeah, I think I realized that the next time I would probably protect myself a little bit different. Like I would prep myself personally a little bit differently. But it was a huge honor. I mean, the people who shared their stories with me, you know, it made it hard for me in many ways, in that I felt the huge weight of responsibility to honor them and what they shared with me. But it was a massive, massive privilege, and some of the personal responses that I've received after this film made it genuinely, if nothing else happens, really worth it.
Oh, good. Yes.
Yay.
Hey, Ashley.
Hi.
Great performance. Wonderful job. Something that I really enjoyed about the portrayal of your character was the way that you physically carried yourself. So what I'm curious about is how much of your physical acting, and particularly at the beginning, the amount of nuance that you had between changing rooms and just even who you were looking at. It was really nice, small switches here and there. So I'm just curious, how much of that was your internal understanding of your character, potentially immersion from it being a true, you know, at least it appeared to be like a real 360-degree set, and from direction, how much of that was sort of balancing those physical decisions?
I've never had this question. This is a good one. It was a combination of factors. I mean, Jen, in preparation for the role as well, she was like, "You're going to do taekwondo, you're going to do boxing, horse riding. Like, you need to be fit." So that was for the physical strength for the shoot. And then on top of that, I worked. You know, I had to. I'm very lucky. I didn't have to like do back-breaking work in my youth. So you know, I needed to have a walk and a way of carrying myself that was obviously like someone who does a lot of physical labor all the time. Honestly, Jen is she's an incredible actress, director, and she pays a lot of attention to detail. And you're right, our sets were so helpful. They were real 360 sets. I mean, the cabin was a real cabin that they built for it and everything. I don't really know if I'm answering this very well, but I had a lot of time with the character before we actually shot. And I mean, I don't know how many times I read the script and stuff. So, but in the workshopping beforehand, we did work on a lot of physicality, and I kind of tried out different things to kind of find where it sat properly with her. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if I'd been doing something crazy. Actually, there were a few times where Jen was like, "Stop doing that weird thing with your face." So there were times where it was definitely directional.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the film. It's brilliant, and your performance is brilliant as well. I think we all noticed some of the incredible makeup effects or so in this movie. Just crazy gore scenes or so, like you clubbing the guy's head in with it. I just wanted to ask you about filming those specific scenes and just working with makeup departments or so, because they seem like such an important part of this movie.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because initially Jen's plan for that scene, and I was surprised when I saw it for the first time, was not to show his face. So we had Nikki Gooley, who's like an amazing makeup artist, makeup designer, and we had Gary, whose second name I have now forgotten, who did the prosthetics. And I actually found it really tricky doing that scene, because obviously we have to shoot me coming in with the gun very close to Harry Reevely, who's got a beautiful face that I did not want to ruin and end his career. And it's like, those are the bits that I find really hard about acting, when you have like almost punch someone but not do it. There have been many times when I have made contact accidentally. So for me that was very difficult, but that face of Harry's, oh my God, it was terrifying. I remember one day he had like this whole amazing prosthetic face where like flesh was peeling off, and it was disgusting. But he had to keep it on the whole day. We were at the lunch break, and I was like, "I'm sorry, Harry, can you just turn? I can't eat my lunch. It's so disgusting." It was so realistic. But yeah, of course, we had amazing stunt doubles as well for the two Aboriginals who were hanging from the tree. They obviously had there were a lot of prosthetics involved. And we're just so lucky that we had a team. You know, a lot of prosthetics can become incredibly expensive, and the more realistic they look, the more expensive they are. So we're just lucky that I have to say, we were so lucky. Everyone involved in this film was truly committed. Even they just wanted to do it because of the script. I mean, I don't think anyone was getting paid the big bucks. So yeah, we just had people who really believed in this story. I don't know if that answered your question, but I didn't have any prosthetics. Everyone kept saying to me, "Why do you get to have clean teeth?"
Thank you very much.
That's a fair question. Yes.
Hi, I'm a little bit lower down. Okay. Hi, I just had a quick question. I think it was really well touched upon by the first person who's asking a question, that the physical reactions that you were having in your body language read very real to me as like a person who's been through kind of, I guess, similar if not different situations. But I wanted to know kind of what your take was on a cast of people who seemed to people that were watching to be mostly male, if not entirely male, but then having a female writer and director, and kind of how that played out and how you felt just having fewer women, I guess, around to deal with the harder things that you had to film.
That's a really good question. Jen was actually very careful on the other side of the camera to have a very good balance of men and women. You know, the makeup artist Nikki and Margot, the costume designer, they were like other mums to me down there. We had Elaine Barrett, the psychologist. She was actually down on set when we were filming the two, like, most difficult scenes for me to film. The two rape scenes. She was on set for all day and would call for breaks and would check in with us. And you know, so there was very much a balance. A lot of our producers, Bruna Papandrea, like Christina, there are a lot of women on set, and as part of the crew, Jen was very adamant to have actually a balance as well, though, even in the crew. With the guys, I mean, Jen cast everyone very, very carefully, and I think wouldn't have had anyone on set who wasn't, you know, I mean, they were all incredibly supportive, and I never for any moment felt like I didn't have the support that I needed, whether it be from females or males or whatever. But having a female director made a huge difference to me in how I felt about the scenes that we were portraying. You know, it was really, really important that we have the female gaze, the female perspective, particularly in these scenes. I'm not saying that those kinds of scenes can't be shot sensitively by a man, of course not, but I'm saying if we're going to show them, we might as well show them from the female perspective and have, you know, women's voice telling them. And everyone was, of course, I mean, it was Jen directing, so everyone was behind that, but that's what made me feel safest. It wasn't, the guys are so unbelievably kind and supportive and really, really sensitive, but for me, that's what made me feel safest, knowing that Jen was telling these scenes and showing them in the way that we wanted them. You know, there's no flesh, there's no, you don't ever see any nudity. It's very much the emotional experience, and you live it with Claire, and that's what I think makes it so affecting.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? There's so many of you. All right, it's fine. I get it. Let me just make sure. When is the film open again?
August 2nd,
August,
I
right?
think.
August 2nd? Okay, just so you know. So you have all that time to go tell the world how much you love this movie. I just want to say, this is just this character is going to stay with me the whole year because it's such a fully formed, complex, well-rounded, you get to express every emotion available to humankind in a single film. And I just want to thank you so much for coming here and talking to us. Ashley, everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for sticking around.